Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the wonderful Aaron Moten to talk all about the series Fallout. One of the things I wanted to start talking about is the fact that you kind of really saw this comparison between the character of Maximus and Cassius and Julius Caesar, the way that Shakespeare described him, which I thought was so interesting and such a great detail in terms of just that dog-like hunger for ambition that he has throughout the series. And I was interested in kind of when you came to that realization and connective point for yourself and how that really formed a lot of Maximus for you.
Oh, you know what? It was all Graham and Geneva's script. It really, I think that they are such an incredible team, especially coming from such different aspects of our industry, to sort of uh do this collaboration, if you will, on this project that we all considered ourselves lucky every day that they were the ones writing these words, that they were, you know, guiding our journey through the world, but it really was them. And perhaps even maybe a little bit of my naivete to the wasteland, it was a lot of work, I think, for me to find images that I could connect to, because I didn't have a familiarity with the game before we started working. And because they were liking what I was bringing to the character, it became a point to like, okay, well then until we're done, I won't go anywhere near picking up a joystick.
Right, but you did spend some time watching people play the game on Twitch and YouTube
Yeah.
videos. Was
Well,
that helpful in just understanding the world, or what tools did that give you?
yeah, it definitely visually, I could see the world. And the amazing job that Kilter, Jonah and Kilter, I mean, they're such an incredible production company. The stuff that the work that they do for location scouting is like none other. I mean, to be shooting in Namibia, and really the only thing we need to add is the little Ferris wheel to make it look like Santa Monica Pier. It's really wild that Jonah was able to file that place away in his brain on a visit there and take, the entire crew there to film. Um, yeah, the world of the game, easy to see that from YouTube and Twitch streamers, but also to see what the people who've invested, not just like casual players like I would myself become, but to see what people who have invested so much time, so many hours into a game, what they still love about it, what keeps bringing them back to it, and hoping to hear, little tips of things that maybe I'll see whenever I'm at work, to go, maybe let's do it this way.
And in talking about the scripts as well, one of the other things that I've heard you describe doing is really just looking through a lot of the scenes and thinking very specifically about Maximus's perspective and, that very unique aspect of what would it be like to grow up as an orphan in the wasteland in a post-apocalyptic world. And I think you've done such a wonderful job in really grounding that in a way that feels very real. And so what were the steps for you in figuring out what his perspective of the world would be?
Oh, well, like you're saying, I do believe that it always starts with perspective. I'm the type of guy that thinks that you should go to the grocery store thinking as if you could see through the person who you're about to play's eyes. It doesn't mean that you should be behaving differently, as method as I feel like I am. I also am the first to, start talking to the camera operators because, those are the people that I usually get along with best on sets. The real filmmakers, that are involved. But I guess it's about it took a process of really trying to keep myself from a bad habit, which is trying to pretend or do something before you're on set. It's like it's a tough thing to keep reading a script over and over and not, act it out while you're doing it. But I actually find it really, really important to make what happens in front of the camera spontaneous, even though you've thought about it for months, uh, the first time you do it should be in front of the camera. It's most likely the first time they've done it, the first time they've said it to this person, certainly in this situation. It's supposed to appear that way. So I don't know. It to me was uh, a lot of, stopping these habitual things that can happen and really trusting, the incredible filmmakers that, you know, Jonah and Kilter pulled together in Amazon for this project. I mean, Howard Cummings' sets was a big help. I mean, as soon as you walk onto sets, I mean, whether it was the Brotherhood, which to me was, I want to spend as much time here as I possibly can, or Philly, I had a similar situation as did Ella, where Jonah wouldn't let us walk onto set. I actually, Ella was rehearsing one day, and I remember walking toward the set because I was like, I want to see the set for Philly. This seems cool. And I started walking up, and two different production assistants grabbed me, and they were like, hey, Jonah specifically said you can't come to set. And I was like, oh, oh, okay. Are you serious? I thought they were joking. But no, because and it also helps in that way. There's a sense of surprise the first time you see some of this stuff, and I'm really grateful for that kind of a leadership in Jonah.
It's so great. And, one of the other things in this world is there's certain things that Maximus is so worldly about and really understands in a way that Lucy doesn't. And then on the flip side, there's things that he has such an innocence and almost a naivety about, the once the idea of romance comes up in the series for him, that's something that it feels like he hasn't had the opportunity to explore before. And so he's kind of then suddenly the more innocent and less worldly one of the two. And so how did you set about finding those flip points of where you felt like his world experience would give him knowledge of something and where you felt like something was completely new?
Uh, sometimes it was on the day playing the great material that they were giving us and seeing what all can it do. You can always try something one way, and once you get it, I don't know, maybe film makes you work more economically sometimes this way, truly, of if I did that, we got that. What else is here? You really want to keep investigating the material. Um, Other times, it's about, I guess, his religious upbringing with the Brotherhood of Steel. To me, I always felt like um, he's just as sheltered as she is. Maximus is just as sheltered as Lucy, and it might not seem obvious. I think on the surface, I found it really important that we were finding those moments where he would tighten up. It really stresses him to be asked to have sex. Like it really stressed him out. Uh, he really didn't know what to do being put in certain circumstances, certain situations, and that whole episode, that whole vault experience for Maximus is got to be, it's life changing for him. I mean, he never knew a place like that existed. I love even earlier in that episode, or the episode previously, he states that he believed that ghosts lived in there. Like, he was just like, no, you just don't go in there. They're weird, you know. Yeah, he's just as sheltered, but it's certainly nice to see that they sort of share in this journey. I guess those both of those characters, as well as with what Walton's doing with both Cooper, Howard, and the Ghoul. They're all talking to each other throughout the series. Whether they're in the scenes with each other or not, these stories are echoing different things, and I think it's a wonderful thing that this show, these characters kind of need something from each other.
It's also really sweet to watch his journey when he goes into the vault, going from, I don't think this place is safe and I think it's a cult, because he's also had to spend his entire existence on high alert. He's always the first person to go, they told us they don't have a weapon, but my gut instinct says that they do. And then all of a sudden he's like, I'm eating oysters and I've got a robe on and this is actually lovely. And so what did you want that space to be for him in terms of, this is the first time I feel like in my whole life I've actually had a moment that I can just relax and not have to be stressed about what's around the corner.
Yeah, well, there's this horrible thing that's happening to the characters of Lucy and Maximus, I think, in this first season, where they really are the pawns of other people. They really don't know why they're chasing this head. They really don't know what it is, what it does. None of that is really revealed until our finale. So it seems almost like he started this path of sort of questioning the brotherhood, whenever he gets assigned to the night that he gets assigned to. And, it sort of starts this domino fall from there. But I really wanted Yeah, that space was important, I think, for him in his journey. I think we begin to step into a world where the both of those characters, both Lucy and Maximus, are getting to make their own decisions about the world they live in and who they want to be in it from this point on, you know.
It's such a great point. And I also wanted to talk about the relationship that he has with Thaddeus throughout the series, because it's
Yeah.
so interesting that he goes through this whole beginning where Thaddeus has no idea it's him in the suit of armor.
Mhm.
And he kind of gets this confession out of him of, I was always beating on him because I was beat on, and I wish that he'd been around long enough to kind of be able to continue that cycle.
Mhm.
And so how do you feel like that conversation and that revelation really changed the way that he was responding to him, and eventually the space of, I'm going to show you my face and I'm going to show you that it's actually me?
Well, yeah, it's wild. I mean, there's something that Thaddeus says in that about he comes from we could tell he came from a place that was better than us. So something like that. Uh you know, Maximus did have a family at one point. He did have like in Shady Sands, he had like as normal of an upbringing as you can have in the wasteland, you know. Uh and that was taken from him. So there's some kind of inherent thing in him where he's, I think, still looking for that family. He's looking for it in the Brotherhood. You know, he's looking for it in Lucy. You know, he's misplacing his trust all the time. But I do, you know, I found that it kind of rang so true to me. Really, really hyper realistic. Of like, if the world turned into a wasteland, I really wouldn't want to be alone. Uh, is how I kind of started thinking about it, and it made me make sense of how someone can place their trust in someone, you know, when everything, you know, even as an audience member myself, I'm like, no, no, don't show him, don't tell him, don't do it, you know. Wait till you're back and you have it, you know, like the mission isn't accomplished, you know. But yeah, I guess that comes from some inherent sort of some intrinsic sort of value that's been set in him and placed in him since childhood. Again, more of which I guess I feel like I know more maybe than our audience knows about what Graham and Geneva have concocted for this backstory. But you know, it you know, it's really sad, I think, what's happened to Maximus.
It is, and so much of that idea of what you're talking about in terms of the loneliness feels like it also exists from the Brotherhood, which is supposed to be a space that he has some semblance of family and community, and yet he's so alone within that space from the beginning. And I was interested in kind of like, if you looked at real world examples of it, you know, because it's obviously very much a military operation, and if you kind of looked at those sorts of group dynamics to think about Maximus's place in the ecosystem.
Group dynamics like that. You know, a really strange one that I mean, because I'm a big film nerd, and a really strange reference that I was watching for group dynamics was Cool Hand Luke. Uh, and partly because I feel like that film is. Have you seen this film? I don't
Yeah,
want to.
it's
We're
such a great
talking.
film.
Okay. It's that weird thing where most of the background make that film. You know, if you think about the egg eating, the 50 eggs, but it's, you know, Paul Newman's slow standing while, you know, 30 other men stand to watch him, you know, and that's what really makes those moments. Um, you know, that kind of stuff I think is just really good for storytelling elements. That those are sort of the things that I I nerded over. In terms of like real military, you know, I can watch what I can, but there's I'm limited in terms of some of the places that I can go. I if I could, I would go to certain areas of the world, but they are deemed unsafe, and I can't do that.
It's also really heartbreaking to watch the scenes and the sequences when he goes back to the Brotherhood at the end of the
Mhm.
series, because it's this thing where he kind of thinks that they're going to celebrate him and they still just treat him exactly the same as before. And he has gone on this whole arc and he's really come out of himself. And then he just retreats back into his shell of being very quiet and very stoic. And so, what was the space that you wanted to find him in when he goes back and finds out that he's not received in the way that he had hoped he might be?
Well, you know what though? I actually I feel like there's this weird thing that's happening for Maximus since the murder of Titus, right? There's this weird thing where he's sort of putting this all together on the fly. He really doesn't have a plan. Uh, and he's just as brave to continue to step forward as he is terrified of what is going on and what might happen. But switching those heads with the character of Lucy, I really thought he thought this might not work and I might die. But if I can at least tell them that I know where the head is, they won't kill me because I'm the only one who knows where it is at this point. Right? It's this sort of like he's not wrong in his thinking and his logic and his processing, but he's there again, it's part of his sheltered awareness of the world at that point. It's still thinking like there's a juvenile sort of type of thinking process of like maybe yeah, that'll work. It's not fully thought out because he allows Thaddeus to escape. He can process, oh, then if you are a ghoul, they might kill you, so get out of here. Um, but he, it's amazing. It's like as much as he wants to be a hero, a knight, he is that effortlessly in the moments where he's not actively thinking about being that. Um, and that comes fully from Graham and Geneva. I think they just did an incredible job with that.
Right, and his decision making and the way that he kind of makes certain choices throughout the series is so fascinating because it's always changing for different reasons. Like when he's completely comfortable taking the fusion core for the suit, and Lucy gives him a different perspective of, you know, you can't do that even though you need it, and that will help save people if it means hurting other people. And so how did you feel like her influence also started to really shift and change the way that he was making choices throughout the series?
Well, yeah, and I do think it starts from the moment he sees her. Honestly, that for him to jump down and his first line in that scene is she said, "Stand down." He's been listening to her. There's this real interest that he has in a person who seems to have not just this moral compass, but that sort of like irradiates this different world. There's something that, of course, he's attracted to in it, but he really has a lot of intrigue, and yeah, there's a lot of when Maximus, I guess, is struggling because he hasn't been alive in the wasteland nearly as long as the ghoul. He's still struggling with what is right and what is wrong. They're the bridge scene, where Maximus obviously thinks like they've got that gun. It's like come on, they're gonna kill us. I've heard this story before. Um, Trust me. There are things that they really need from each other, but yeah, it is a big change to his life. Maximus, obviously, the story we're telling, Maximus would not be who he becomes in season 20. Thousand. I don't, but he wouldn't be the person that he becomes if he didn't meet Lucy, at this point in his life.
I agree, and it's so lovely to watch the way that he opens up and trusts her and is received by her as well. Particularly that scene where he tells her the backstory of Titus. It's like, I'm actually Maximus. This is what happened, and he has so much shame for it. And she sees
Mhm.
him as we've all had to make certain choices in order to survive and in order to do what we have to. I mean, look, I've been on the surface for a few days and look what I've done. And so how did that also just completely open up a different space between the two of them for you? And, I've told you what I felt was one of my darkest moments and darkest secrets, and I've told you the truth, and you see me fully and you still accept me.
Yeah. You know what? I love working with Ella Purnell. That's what you're reminding me of. I mean, that night we were shooting that scene. I remember we really did start kind of basic with it. And I remember being extremely thankful that we were doing something that was very, I mean, everybody wants this when they're watching things. You just don't want the tropes. You don't want to see what you've seen before. You don't want to see like hey, someone else exposes him as lying, you know what I mean? And then she's mad and they go their separate ways because we've seen that before, you know. I really loved this sort of sense of like, you know what? Because it's gets sparked by Lucy's line of saying something like, "You're a really good person," you know, and you should come back and live in my vault with me, you know. It's like it's a real admittance from that character that she has the same feeling that he feels, you know. He you know, I often got reminded in these scenes with Lucy that it's almost like Romeo and Juliet. Juliet has these incredible, you know, this incredible imagery in her words, and she does all these incredible things with that language. And Romeo is much more basic. You know, it's like he's like, yeah, the moon. And she's like, don't talk about the moon. And he's like, oh, the you know that I mean, I'm dumbing down Romeo and Juliet, but you know, Juliet references literature and all these different sorts of things. It reminded me of that. It's like there's this, you know, wounded young man who really needs a friend, and this is the friend that he's found. But as he's found that friend, it's not like the reveal to Thaddeus, it's almost the reverse of it. It's like Lucy reveals herself to him, and he then has to reveal, you know, and it's sort of, yeah, a little bit of he's ashamed of it for sure. You know, I feel like every time Lucy says the name Titus, you should, you know, read what is on Maximus's face. It's like, yeah, it hurts every time. It keeps hurting. Um, but yeah, it's well, why am I forgetting the question? Where did we come from? How did I get here?
No, it's such a great journey, and it also just kind of reminds me of the fact that he has such a response when she offers not only herself but her community and her family to him, and the
Yeah.
idea of what that would mean to him. And it kind of feels like that's also part of why he reveals the truth. It's, you know, I can't absorb myself into your world and take all these things if I'm not giving you truth and honesty in return. And so what did you feel that it meant to him for her to offer her community and her family to him as well as herself?
Oh yeah, no, the world. I think that was his purpose. You know, I think that's what makes our finale so like so much the obliteration of optimism, you know, for a lot of the characters. You know, it really is uh it's quite a blow for him to wake up in that room alone, to feel abandoned again, I guess. And also trapped, really stuck now in, you know, in the ranks of the Brotherhood. Um, and I can't wait to see what that journey will be moving forward.
I can't wait either. And talking about Lucy's family with her dad, you know, it's such a different moment when he finally meets him. It's like, great, oh, I'll let you out, come with us. And then he discovers the truth
Oh,
of
cool.
everything.
Yeah.
And there's such anger in that
Mm,
swing that he takes. And
yeah.
so how did you want it to just completely upend all the ideas and expectations and take him somewhere else where he's essentially taking on Lucy's anger for himself as well?
Uh, I, you know, I remember there's these small little things sometimes that do feel, uh, you know, the source material being a video game, it feels like a video game. It almost felt like releasing Hank is that moment where like you've got this optional quest on the side where you're like, oh wait, I can do that too real quick. Okay, cool. We got him. You know, Lucy's been looking for her dad this entire time. Great. We got him. Um, yeah, that swing though, it's yeah, I really wanted to at least be able to, you know, what is it? It's we have what 2 seconds. We give Maximus maybe 2 seconds of the puzzle piece, the jigsaw falling into place, you know, and he gets knocked out cold. And but all I knew is that we had to go back to that. There's this animal inside Maximus, you know. There really is. He. That's why I guess we can see so much potential in him, and we also can understand. why he just is running headfirst into, problem after problem. But there's a real hungry dog in him, and he really is yearning for something that a lot of us, I mean, what do we think morally of revenge in our lives? It is he gets pulled into these dark places uh by the wasteland, because of his experiences. So, I knew that we just wanted to make it was important, I guess, to show something before he gets knocked out cold, and yeah, that to me, I think we loved settling on that sort of animalistic sort of rage
It's
bursting out,
it's so great.
yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about filming the scenes where you're essentially in that massive night
Mhm.
suit, because
Mhm.
it's such close-up proximity that the camera has, and almost this feeling of claustrophobia because there's no space on either side of your face to
Oh
kind of like
boy.
have any leeway or movement. And so what was that experience of just
Jeez.
having to perform in a very different way for those scenes?
We always talk about, I have this debauched kinesthesia with acting. What I feel and experience, an audience doesn't necessarily feel and experience. There's like some people have even said, like, as an actor, you don't have to feel anything. It's about the audience feeling something. It's all true. It's just that was claustrophobic for me as well. It was a wild setup that was just so bare. This really, I mean, we had like so many different iterations of it. Jonah really wanted to do something different. And I really commend him for being the type of filmmaker who understands, if you actually do something quickly and you fail at it, you actually haven't wasted very much time. Uh, and I'm always game for working with Jonah because of that. Let's try and fly the drone inside the volume set, because he did that my first day. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many things that he'll be willing to try and do, willing to fail, but ultimately you get something out of all of it. So, he's quite a force. But yeah, it was this long lens directly at my face, and Jonah discovered, hey, if one of the big issues was moving too much. Like, Jonah would say, like, okay, try and walk. And he'd be like, oh, that's too much. And then you like go a little, and he's like, no, that's not enough. And then you're trying to fine tune this thing. And he realized if he put a C stand behind my head with a little ball so that I had like a point of contact, I knew like where to be set, and I didn't have to move off that. But it was thankfully Adam Shippey, our stunt performer, who wears the full movable armor. I only wear the top half and I get in the shell, but that doesn't move at all. Um, Adam and I would have to work together every day on set if he were playing me in a scene. So Jonah would have me walk a rehearsal, and Adam would be there, and then Adam and I started having our side huddles, in between takes. Every time we're like, okay, well, why don't you try this? Or like, what I would do, I would probably want to, and Adam is an amazing performer because he plays a lot of different people in that suit, throughout the series. And they are different. The Titus from the beginning moves very differently in that suit than Maximus, and I can only commend him for that incredible performance. But yeah, we had to work so closely together, and that was the only reason why I could then be able to reenact what we had done on the day with that camera right here, with Jonah in a dark studio room. Uh, Sometimes months later.
It's so great. There's so much creativity and so many wonderful details in the show. So really, really
Mhm.
appreciate you talking about it. It's been so fascinating to hear all of these details.
No, thank you. Are you kidding? This is fun.